Hello and welcome back to the channel guys, Dreamcast Enjoyer here to talk to you about why I think Illbleed is the perfect Halloween game. Not to say that I think it's the greatest horror game ever made, it certainly isn't, not to say that I think it's super scary, but it is a game with some really specific, particular traits that just work really well for the Halloween season, and we'll get into them in a minute. Let's just quickly scoot over the premise in case you haven't heard of this one. I did very briefly talk about it last year in a video where I tried to do all the Dreamcast horror games, but this one really deserves a bit of a spotlight all on its own. And so the setup of the game is this. Eric O'Christie is a high school student with some really tropey high school student friends, and they all get these weird invites to go to this spooky haunted house event type thing where they can win a lot of money if they pass all the challenges. That is it, it's as simple as that for the setup of the game. There is a little bit more character building and a few twists and turns, but I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler free as I possibly can for you guys. Essentially, I just want to explain to you why I feel you should really fire this one up if you get the chance on today of all days. And the immediate obvious thing there is it's a virtual haunted house experience. You can't really get more Halloweeny than that. The game starts us off in this Michael Reynolds virtual horror land, and what that essentially is, gameplay wise, is a hub world. But storyline wise, it's this amusement park with a variety of different themed haunted houses that you can go into as part of this challenge, and they form the different stages of the game. And before you go to any of them, it's worth scooting over to the back corner and going to the graveyard to get a little bit of a tutorial on how the game works, because this game is really weird. If you've never played it before, you might already be wondering, well, how would a virtual haunted house work? You know, am I just walking around and things are popping out? It is kinda that, but it's gamified a lot more. So you'll notice across the top of the screen, we got this bar here with our sensors, a sight, hearing, smell, sixth sense. And they have kind of little heart monitor things that boop up and down depending on what's going on. And this tutorial section here teaches you how to use the horror monitor. The horror monitor is the main kind of mechanic of this game, and it's really original. I've never seen this kind of idea done in another game since. What this does is it puts a little scope on when you go into first person view. And you can free look, but as you do, you'll notice your character snaps to certain objects, and you can pinpoint these as things of interest or things that you are worried about. And the basic idea is that when the scares do come, if you've pinpointed them, your character will not be harmed by whatever the spooky thing is, because she was already aware of it. But the way that the game twists that around a little bit to make it challenging is you can't just mark everything, because you have an adrenaline meter, which for some reason dips down as you mark things. If you successfully mark something and you were correct, that was the scary thing, and then it doesn't scare you, you'll get some adrenaline back. But if you mark something that wasn't scary and nothing happens, your adrenaline falls down. This is where this meter comes in at the top. If your sight is going crazy, you know, your sight meter, and there's like a TV nearby, you might want to mark that TV because the spook might be a visual spook that the character's expecting. Likewise, if there is a radio nearby and the character's hearing is going, you might want to mark the radio. Stuff like that. But I think that's a really clever and interesting way to kind of gamify a haunted house. Now, I'm not sure what clips I will have used up to this point in the video, but at some point you're going to see that there is combat and there's blood and guts flying everywhere, and things do look very incredibly gory. But the game does also take pains at times to kind of break the fourth wall and remind you that everything is animatronic. There are in fact some pretty funny scenes where that happens.
Shoot, what kind of idiot is calling me at this hour? Yeah, what do you want? I'm working here. Ooh, Jessica, it's you.
Cool.
But whether the threat is real or not, your character's anxiety is, and they can still die of a heart attack if they get too spooked. So you really got to be mindful of all these different things. You've got your stamina, you've got your adrenaline, you've got your pulse rate, you've got your bleeding rate because you can get cut and bleed all over the floor and lose health that way a la Dino Crisis. But at the end of the day, it is a funhouse kind of experience for you, and everything is pretty goofy that goes on. Even the violent or grotesque stuff is pretty silly. And that's another reason that I think this fits in for Halloween, because if you're like me, you might have this tradition of watching really cheesy, awful B-movies at Halloween. Me and my friends used to do this when I was younger, where we'd just go and buy a job lot of VHSs and watch them all, and they'd be of varying quality. You know, some of them might actually have been scary, some were silly, some were gory, some were maybe even a little bit upsetting. And so we'd really get this kind of anthology story experience, you know, like reading a series of short stories or watching an anthology TV show like Channel Zero or something. And that's the kind of experience that you get here with Illbleed as well, because each haunted house has its own individual story. And some of them you can take a little bit more seriously. Like the first one is about this zombified dad that's gone mad because his son was killed and he's like trying to kill people to avenge his son's memory or something. It is all strange and it doesn't land, and it is played largely in a very silly way. But nonetheless, you can kind of glean some horror out of that, whereas some of the other ones are just, well...
Rachel! I've missed you so. You appear to be okay. Oh, that's a relief. At last, we can be together forever.
But I think that tonal whiplash is really good for the kind of B-movie vibe that this game was going for. Maybe buried the lead by not mentioning this earlier, but this game does have what I consider to be some Dreamcast royalty attached to it. See, this was the follow-up to Blue Stinger by Shinya Nishigaki and his team. Even though this one was developed by Crazy Games, that's just a rebranding of Climax Graphics, who made Blue Stinger, one of my all-time favourite games. And also a game with some B-movie vibes, although more of an action-y sci-fi kind of thing there, whereas this is pure horror. And likewise, there's some very recognisable vocal talent here. The lead character, Eriko, is voiced by Lani Minella, who you will at very least know as Rouge the Bat, and you might also know from Mac and X, or Janine from Blue Stinger, or a million other games that aren't necessarily Dreamcast. And Kevin, one of the friends of Eriko, he's voiced by Ryan Drummond, Sonic the Hedgehog himself. Sonic even kinda makes a weird parody cameo later on in this very game. So if you haven't played it, you might be wondering, well, how does this all map out then? Do I just walk around spooky corridors looking at things all day? And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, that is probably a good 50 or 60% of the game. But there is combat as well. Sometimes you'll just get random encounters with enemies. Some of these guys look like they're from Splatterhouse or something, these big bony zombie dudes, or sometimes there's just like crash test dummies. You also get some survival horror type puzzles, nothing too taxing, but it does break up the pace. And then also you'll just randomly get mini games like this one.
You're here again. This will be our last chance to play together. Look, it's a jump rope. All you gotta do is jump into that jump rope as it's spinning around and use that A button to jump. If you can jump 10 times without missing, you pass the test. But if you get snagged in the rope just once, a poison thorn on the rope will kill you. How do you like that, Buster? You scared? Quit lagging and let's begin.
In some ways, I think this image here is the best summing up of Illbleed. Eriko skipping with barbed wire over a rope held by an evil murderous doll in a weird creepy park. Because all of the strange clashing elements are on display. The really bright colourful Dreamcast hero, the slightly spooky but silly and cutesy bad guy, but then the actual threat of danger with the blood and the barbed wire and the general creep factor. It is a fucking weird game, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it's really cool. Now I do feel like I'm skirting around all the individual haunted houses a little bit, but I don't want to give too much of the story away or too many of the spooks, because if you haven't played this game before, it really is a heck of an experience to just go in blind and just kind of sit there in disbelief. Sometimes you'll be laughing your ass off, sometimes you'll be thinking, I can't believe this is happening, because sometimes the game gets really gross and tasteless, but hey, it's B-movie stuff, man. But I do just want to give a shout out to one late part of the game that I think is a really interesting kind of meta bit of narrative, and that is the Killer Man stage. Now the way this one subverts your expectations is almost a little bit like something Kojima would do. See, every stage starts with a kind of movie trailer setting up the premise of what this particular haunted house is going to be about. This one's no different. Sets up the story of this kind of evil superhero looking guy called Killer Man. But when the stage starts, nothing happens. You're not in a haunted house, you are sat in the cinema watching this movie that's ended. And then when you walk down and go to leave, you think the stage is going to start. It doesn't. You're just in the backstage area of the Illbleed theme park. This is the most narrative heavy of the stages because, as you've probably already gathered, something strange is going on. You know, why haven't we just gone into the Killerman themed haunted house? Why are we backstage? And then we do notice the corpse of an employee with a star-shaped mark, looking like they have been killed by Killerman, who we assumed was a fictional character, you know? And so it gets a little bit twisty and turny. Eriko wants to work out what's going on, why there's been a murder at this park, and how they can solve it. Also, one of the Killerman costumes has gone missing from the prop section. Again, we're reminded that this is a theme park, you know, it's all fake, someone shouldn't really be dying here. So it turns everything that we've known about the game so far on its head, and it makes for a really cool narrative beat. I love this whole stage, it's my favourite one in the game, both aesthetically because there's some cool sci-fi stuff, and also narratively because there's some interesting twists and turns and a really good speech at the end that I don't want to spoil for you. And then after you solve the Killerman case, you're kind of in the last leg of the game, and I don't really want to spoil any of that for you because there are just so many fucking batshit crazy things going to happen. To sum it up, I think that Illbleed is the perfect encapsulation of a lot of the kind of stuff we do at Halloween. Go into haunted houses, watching B-movies, or reading short spooky stories, sometimes lots of them. This game gives you all of that, plus you're playing a survival horror video game, so there's another thing to it. Basically all the stuff I like to do at this time of year, this game's got it in spades. And so I really recommend, with my whole entire heart, that you check this one out and make it your Halloween game. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. But if I talk any more about Illbleed, I'm going to get into spoilery territory, and so I'll just wrap it up. Thank you very much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit all the buttons and let me know. I'll be back very soon with some more videos, so hope to see you then. But for now, happy Halloween, stay safe out there, and take care.